podcasts are about power. The power to define and the power to decide. From protests to power gain, we welcome you to our fight for political and economic freedoms here in America. We're almost there. Welcome to this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Judy Richardson, and 60 years as a SNCC veteran. Well, SNCC worker. And I'm so glad to be here on this SNCC Legacy Project podcast. And also to be talking to the wonderful Tiffany Loftin and Ajamu Amiri Dillahunt, whom I have known for a few years, not quite as long as I've known my SNCC veteran people. But it's great because it's an intergenerational conversation, which we've been doing for some years now. And it's so important, because it's a two-way street. We learn from them, they learn from us. And, it's what's really urgent in terms of the horrible issues that we're dealing with today and how we get through them and work together to solve some of this stuff. So I'm so happy to be here. Now, I'll tell you what, let's just start out with really how we first get involved in these social justice movements. We all get to them through different routes. So I'll start first, and then, hopefully you guys will pick it up. So for me, it was totally unplanned. I grew up in Tarrytown, New York, just 25 miles north of New York City. It's a factory town. It was also a suburbs, but I didn't know about the suburb part. Those were the white people. They lived on the other side of the hill. My father worked at the plant, the Fisher Body plant that made parts for Chevrolet cars. And he helped organize the union local there. And so he dies on the assembly line when I'm 7 years old. My mother, single parent, she gets me to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, my older sister to another college. And while my first year, my freshman year, I see a leaflet for a campus group that I later find out is a chapter of SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society, right? And that's the primarily white national student group that's on campuses all over the country at that time. They were very supportive of the SNCC and the student students. So I find out that this group, this SDS group, is organizing a bus to travel to Cambridge, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, to support a local organization that's protesting segregation, right? And so I get there, and let me just say, I had no real politics at that time. Some a little bit, but not much. I mainly go to this meeting because my mother's not there to stop me. This is my first time away from home. It's like, this is all new. Let me see what I can get into. So I get there, and the most out leader there was Gloria Richardson, who was fierce. And I later find out that this local group, which is very group-centered in terms of their leadership, that this group is a SNCC affiliate, which is one of the reasons that they are community and grassroots group-centered, because that was the way that SNCC operated. So I end up being in jail on the weekends, and I then decide, okay, I'm going to take off the next semester. And I end up sending an application to Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, the amazing, she was often called the general, right? And I was told, since I'm coming from the North, I got to send an application in to get put on staff, which meant, at least I would get my little $9.64 after taxes, which I needed because, as I said, my mother was a single parent. So, and I'm only supposedly doing this for one semester, the next semester, which was the first semester my sophomore year. So I figure, okay, I get, it's okay. And we won't even go into what my mother says when I tell her I want to do this, since I had this full 4-year scholarship to Swarthmore College. But I had maintained the scholarship. It's going to be okay. I decide, okay, I'm going to go down, right? So it's now September 1963. And I go down, and I'm working with Gloria Richardson, Reggie Robinson, who is the SNCC field secretary from Baltimore, but he was an early SNCC organizer. And so he's now the SNCC coordinator in Cambridge, Maryland. And at some point he says, why don't we all go down why don't we join with me? You and I will go down to the national office, and then we'll come back up, to Cambridge. And so I go down, again, I'm coming back. I'm going back to Cambridge. And I go down, and the first thing I'm thinking, office, national office, it's going to be, rugs on the floor, just amazing, plush. That's right. So I get down there, and I come up. First of all, I see Reggie, and it was next to a beauty parlor or a barber shop, and it had this glass, this national office, right a block off what was then called Hunter Street and is now Martin Luther King Boulevard. Anyway, I see Reggie go up. I see him open the door of this glass door, and he runs up the stairs, and he's hugging this big guy who is sweeping the stairs. And I'm thinking, oh, how egalitarian, SNCC must be, because there's Reggie and he's hugging the janitor, right? Well, I found out that that's Jim Foreman, the bigger than life executive secretary. And he is sweeping the stairs, which he often did, not very well, but he did it because for him, it was a way of showing to all the people, SNCC staff, anybody who visited, that no job is too little in SNCC to do, and every job is important to the organization. And there are SNCC people who all have this story of Foreman saying, "Okay, I want you to sweep the stairs." Right? That was a common denominator. And then, of course, I get in and I find out that there's a research department, and there's a Northern Support Committee, and there is Friends of SNCC and campus friends of SNCC. And there's Julian Bond typing with two fingers, doing press releases. That there is this hubbub of activity. Most of the folks look like me. All of them are my age, 17, 18, 19 years old. And not only did I get there, and of course, I don't go back to Swarthmore, and I stayed there for 3 years in Mississippi, Alabama, Southwest Georgia. But the main thing was I find my home. I find my my movement home. And so it's still my home, 60 years later. But what I want to do is pass it now to Tiffany, and you tell me how you got involved.
Miss Judy, thank you so much for your story. I resonate with so much of what you said, and I actually want to know what your mama said when you did not come back to your college and you decided to stay up there for 3 years, because I think that would be really important for us to know as well. But my mother and my father are both union members. I did not know what being a union member meant. I didn't know what that meant for the economy. I didn't even know what that meant for a Black family living in Los Angeles. And what I realized very quickly was that I went from public school to public education to living in shelters to public school to struggling on how to apply to get into college very quickly, and realized the different experiences that students had when their parents had money and both of them were college educated and both of them had Wi-Fi and internet access, versus my family, where my mother became a single mother after divorcing my dad, telling me that I had to go to college, which she had never experienced and didn't know how to do. She didn't know how to write a personal statement. She had no idea what the heck FAFSA stood for. Nevertheless, how to find it on the website. And then I was charged with setting the example for my younger sister and my younger brother, who actually never went to college themselves. So my mother said, all you have to do is go to college and have fun and graduate. Those are my instructions. So now I got to figure it out. I was a student recipient of what's called the TRIO program, which receives a little bit of government funding to support students who come from low-income backgrounds, communities of color, on how to fill out the college application. And the thing that was most beneficial to me in that program was learning what it was like to be on a college campus. My mother never took me and couldn't take me to a university to tour the campus and to see what the school looked like, what professors did on the campus, what my living experience would look and feel like. I didn't have any of that until the TRIO program did a field trip and took some of the students from my high school on the program. But I'll never forget, Miss Judy, there was a white woman who was a college counselor at Birmingham High School in San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles, who said to me, Tiffany, college might not be the route for you. You might want to go to get a full-time job and be part-time at CSUN, which was there's no problem with community colleges, but I wanted to go to UCLA. And she told me that was not in the cards for me, even though I had a really great GPA. I was in AP classes. I was in theater. I was track and field, city champion. I was doing all the things. And Dr. Black, that white woman, looked at me and said, maybe college is not for you. And I then became determined, as an Aries young Black woman would, to go to an institution that was far away from home. And I got into only UC Santa Cruz, When I arrived at UC Santa Cruz, the regents, who are the decision makers of the school system, decided to raise our tuition 38%, my first year of college. I already had zero family contribution. I already had to take out a bunch of student loans, which I'm still paying off to this day. And I met students who were undocumented for the very first time at UC Santa Cruz. Now in LA, we got Black and brown people everywhere, but I didn't understand that folks could not have citizenship, and that there was paperwork that you needed to prove that you could get benefits being here, and get in-state tuition for college. And I didn't understand any of that until I got to school, and the regents rose our tuition, and 3 or 4 of the students in my dormitory dropped out of college the first year. And I was like, where are y'all going? Why are you leaving? We all just got here. We're building this community. We have these relationships in the dorm room. Why don't you just take out more loans? Why don't you just get more grants? And the reality of the situation is they couldn't, right? Because they were undocumented. They didn't have access, and they didn't have the privileges to apply to those programs to get financial aid so they can continue to finish their college education. So I got mad. Then I found out that Black students were impacted by that same rule and legislation, that there were Black students who were undocumented who could no longer finish school because the tuition was too damn high. And I got angry. I wanted to find out, how do we stop tuition increases from going up so that students like me can go to this school without being in shackles and shackles of debt? And how do we make sure that those who are undocumented, who already have to pay out-of-state tuition, could still finish their college education, and we could all be in community here on campus together? I was then living in my dormitory when somebody came and knocked on my door and asked me to sign a postcard. The postcard was addressed to our representatives and elected officials in Washington, D.C. And the postcard that we were signing was an endorsement. We were asking our elected officials to support the Federal Dream Act. I knew nothing about legislation, Ms. Judy. I had no idea even how that worked. I saw how a bill becomes a law, but I didn't know that I could help the bill become a law, right? So I signed the postcard, it got sent off, and I said, wait a minute, can I take a couple of those postcards? Because I have friends who want to sign those too, because a couple of students in the dormitory got kicked out and can't be here anymore. So now I'm volunteering myself to be a part of this campaign to get other people to sign the postcard. Well, that was my entry into, as you called it, which I so love very deeply, my movement family. That was the introduction into my movement family at my college institution at the University of California, Santa Cruz. It was because of that campaign that I understood how people power works, because the University of California, Santa Cruz worked on that campaign with the University of California Student Association that was up and down the state of California, which worked with 12 other statewide student associations across the country that were all a part of this national organization called the United States Student Association. So now we have 12 million students across the country calling for Congress to pass the Federal Dream Act. And I felt like I was part of something that was way bigger than myself. And it passed in the Senate, and it fell 3 votes shy in the House. So we did not win our victory. But I got more mad, and I said, well, who are those 3 people that didn't vote for the Federal Dream Act? Give me their names. We need to go meet with them in Washington, D.C. And the United States Student Association organized every year a national legislative conference that went to Washington, D.C., where I had my opportunity to meet with elected officials face-to-face in D.C., tell them about my story. And Ms. Judy, when I was running for student body president, after being vice president 3 times, one of my very own peers at the University of California, Santa Cruz in the year 2010 carved nooses and hung a noose on my campus while I was running for student body president. So I was a volunteer for the first couple of years of my activism until I realized that there was something that impacted me directly. And then I started to build with I was already building with the Black community at my university, but now I was able to work with the Black community to create demands on racial justice at the university, where the great Angela Davis teaches graduate classes there, and Bell Hooks graduated, and we have so many legends who have come to UC Santa Cruz. And I got convicted in this work to know, 1, that I'm not alone, 2, that people actually do have power to make real concrete changes that improve people's lives, and 3, the power of my voice and my story. So I'm really happy to be here with 2 of y'all.
Oh, Tiffany, that's a story. That is such a wonderful story. And before I go to Ajamu, I just got to say, you remind me of the fact that, People think that movements, particularly our movement, the civil rights movement, SNCC, we were all kumbaya and we're singing in beloved community. Now, beloved community was real, but for me, I get into it because of righteous rage. I am pissed that this man is telling me I cannot come through these doors. Some little dinky bar and grill, smell the rock gut liquor. And he's telling me I can't come in. I'm trying to figure out why white people want to go into this place, right? So the righteous rage is real. Okay, let me go to you, Ajamu. I know you come from a history of family too, of who were righteous freedom fighters. But how did you get into the movement?
Yeah. First, I have to say, both of you are absolutely amazing storytellers. I honestly didn't want to speak. I said I could be good listening to Tiffany and Judy talk about their stories, and I really enjoy Tiffany when she tells a story. I remember some of the sessions for the SNCC Legacy Projects, oral history sessions. When Tiffany would speak, you would definitely be captured by it. So yeah, I'm just glad to be here with the both of you. You're both amazing. I admire you both. The work you all have done and continue to do is definitely important to our movement and our world. So thank you both. I was born in the movement and really didn't have a choice. My grandparents were both union leaders. My grandmother was a teacher in public schools here in Raleigh, and my grandfather was the president of the local APWU, American Postal Workers Union, here for 18 years. And their office was right beside each other's. And so my mom and aunts were raised in the struggle. And my grandparents had the first black bookstore in Raleigh called Freedom Books from 1984 to 1994. And my mom and aunts talk about after high school, they didn't go to the mall or anything. They had to go work at the bookstore. And so before I got on this earth, my path was kind of already written for me. And then my grandparents took me, my sister, and my cousins to union meetings, marches, rallies, Kwanzaa celebrations. Every day, there was some activity we were part of, and so I have pictures from my childhood. I'm at Palestine solidarity rallies to end the war. I'm at union picket meetings, holding up signs, end the war, and so that was my life. But honestly, I wasn't conscious of it until about 2014. Before then, I was a soccer player. Soccer was life. I didn't really take school too serious because I said, "Why school? I can just go overseas, play soccer. Grades aren't too important." But then after Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, I began to really ask questions about why this kept happening. And so I'm a junior in high school. I'm a sophomore going into my junior year, and there's a big incident like right after Mike Brown was murdered. There was an incident at a local high school where these black students were targeted, and so I'm like, Grandma, what's going on? So her being plugged into the work already took me to this meeting with parents, with students, and they were talking about this thing called the school to prison pipeline. So I'm like, what is this? So this is how racism is being developed here on a local level in my school. This is impacting me. And then I went to a restorative justice training at Campbell Law School, a law school here in Raleigh. School introduced into this world of young people being active and these young people coming from a local group, high school students who were going to school board meetings, demanding solutions, not suspensions, demanding counselors, not cops, demanding restorative justice, demanding peer mediation, demanding more counselors in schools. And so I said, well, I want to be with them. So I joined the organization and I found myself not interested much in soccer, but more interested in going to the march or going to the rally or going to the press conference or going to the community meeting. And I gave one of my first at this. I was stuttering, I was nervous, but that was my introduction to the movement, fighting the school to prison pipeline here on a local level, and pushing my school to implement solutions, not suspensions. And I got an internship which does a lot of good legal work. And they had me distributing know your rights cards at local high schools because I was still a senior in high school. So I was distributing, these cards and trying to get my peers to be active participants in transforming society and ending the school to prison pipeline. So that's how I got into the movement. And then when 2015 came, I was graduating high school, and I only wanted to go to one place. That was North Carolina Central University. And my main priority was, what can I do to help make the world a better place? How can I change the world? And I got there, and Dr. Jarvis Hall said, my first class, he said, if you don't remember anything from this class, you will remember the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I said, oh, well, I'm right at home. And so it was a life full of activities at North Carolina Central University. But the movement has been a part of my life. It became real conscious. I began to see my real role in it while I was in high school. And I've been, trying to fight, continue to fight ever since. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to digging deep.
Honey, and you said you couldn't story tell. Please. That is a wonderful, I love that story. Okay, let me go to another one. And by the way, if anybody, if either you want to interject, ask a question, I'm not the only one asking, but I do have a list. Anyway, so let's talk about what we're doing now and how what we learned in our earlier movement organizing informs what we do now. So think about that, because I'm gonna go first on this one. And so, I run two tracks. I run the filmmaking track. I'm we just finished the Frederick Douglass film for the National Park Service here. It's going to be wonderful. I can just say that. And then, for about 4 other Civil Rights Museum films. But the main thing is I do the filmmaking thing, and then I also do the education work. Well, I started the film stuff working with the 14-hour series Eyes on the Prize, right? I had no experience, but I had the movement grounding, and that's why I got hired, because Henry Hampton, head of Black Side, assumes that I will be able to, have people return our calls, because don't nobody know Black Side at that point, right? So what I learned, though, I brought skills with me from SNCC, right? Skills, and also just a sense of movement and how you operate with people, how you respect people. But I also learned to listen, because in SNCC, you were canvassing, doing voter registration. You had to listen to what people were telling you. We're not imposing an agenda on communities. We are going into communities and asking, well, what do you want to do here? What will make your life better? How do you get power here? So we're asking them what they want to do in their communities. So you had to be quiet. You learned how to listen and listen carefully. Well, that serves you in good stead. It's in good stead when you're doing interviews, on the phone, in person. So when I do it, I have all my questions ready, but I'm looking at the person, because no matter what they're saying, I'm really interested, and I'm nodding, I'm doing it because I want to get the best out of them, and I want to get the information. But I learned how to do that from SNCC. The other thing I learned how to do, and I learned it by the way in SNCC. When we're doing, we had what was called an 800 line, and it was called the Watts line, the wide area telephone service. But it was an 800 line, and all the projects in Mississippi, Alabama, Southwest Georgia, Arkansas, they would call in twice a day, and then you would take down the notes about, what church had been burned, who had been shot at, if anybody had been killed. All of those you're writing down. We do stuff with it, but I don't want to take time now to talk about that. But the main thing was you had to listen and get the information down very clearly. And so I learned that from SNCC. But then also we had a research department, right? I mean, crusty old white guy, Jack Minnis, ran the research department. And we learned how to get information. We learned who was the mover and shaker in the town, that it wasn't just this individual owner of this individual store, who owned the chain. When I'm sitting in at the Tottle House with all these other SNCC people, we bought stock in Tottle House because it was a chain in Atlanta. We didn't go after the individual person. We're going after the corporate head. And in fact, bought stock. And at one point, Dick Gregory's wife, the famous comedian Dick Gregory, his wife, and Bobby Yancey, who later goes to the Schomburg as the number 2 person at the Schomburg in Harlem Library. She was the director of campus and friends, No, it was developing SNCC chapters on HBCUs. So that was Bobby Yancey. Okay, but before she gets to the Schomburg, she's doing this with SNCC. She and Dick Gregory's wife, Lillian, we buy stock, cousin Jack Minnis, right? Who says, buy some stock. So they buy stock, they go up to the stockholders meeting and say, what are you doing in Atlanta? You need to desegregate, We always understood what the Board of Trade was, who are the people who really run the town. It's not that individual sheriff. It's not that, always going to the corporate and the systemic. We always understood the systemic. Okay, we didn't call it that then, but that's what we understood. So I get that. So when I'm doing film work, and then I'm going to stop and shove it to you. When I'm doing film work, I do chronologies because I learned from Jack Minnis, so that people, like, for example, there was a surge of police brutality in New York. Well, there's always police brutality everywhere, but there was a particular surge in New York City in the 80s when I am director of information for the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice. So, surge, Eleanor Bumpers, 69 years old, shot with a shotgun to death by Officer Sullivan in an eviction, right? Michael Stewart, in his 20s, had tried to beat Fair in the subway, beaten to death by 5 transit workers. Okay, so what I do as part of Director of Informations for the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, what I do is do a chronology, because I want people to see it's not this individual cop, it's not this individual person, right? You need to see this as systemic. It is, he's not on his own, right? So, but I learned this from SNCC, who has this chronology, so that when the people come down in 1964, because it's 1964 Freedom Summer, and we know these 700 primarily white students are coming down to try and help us as we try to get Black people registered to vote without getting them killed, right? Registered to vote without getting them killed. Well, as we're doing that, we're trying to give protection as we're doing this work, because so many local leaders have been killed. So folks come down. Well, as a result, you get these 700 people, and the media follows them, which we know. One of the reasons we're asking that they come down. So, but Jack Minnis prepares this chronology. So you see, okay, it's not just this crazy man who's the mayor of Jackson, and he has a Thompson tank, right? Because he's going against these outside agitators, similar to what they did with the Gaza folks. Oh, they're all outside agitators. Oh, please. So we know this is a theme for anybody who is opposing social justice. Anyway, what we do with this chronology is we show all of these reports from 1961 to 1964, of all of these reports that we've been taking every day from all of our state projects. And so you see a particular instance of police brutality in the context of the general systemic white supremacy that is operating at the time. But I learned that, and I bring it with me to both filmmaking, and then when I'm press director with, the United Church of Christ. So I'm gonna go to you first, Ajamu. How do you see what you learned as fuel, as a foundation for the way you operate now?
Yeah. From high school, and I had the opportunity to be around some politically mature young people, so I was able to get a full breadth of not just the school to prison pipeline as an important issue or as something that's isolated, but they were connecting it in 2014 to what was happening in Palestine. So in 2014, they had this Freedom School at a church here in Raleigh. And it was, the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer 1964. So I remember watching you, Charlie, and so many others on the screen. And I'm this high school student, like, wow, these are young people who are making a change, moving society forward. So I'm learning this history about SNCC, about young people, about the contribution that I could possibly make. And then I'm getting exposed to international issues in a more concrete way about how what's happening in Ferguson, what's happening in Raleigh is connected to what is happening in Palestine. So this internationalism was developing. Now the language to organize around it, I didn't necessarily concretely have until much later. But that foundation around the question of police, the question of safety, the question of alternatives to safety, the question of we keep us safe has been a guiding tool throughout. When I was in undergrad, we were building the BYP 100 Durham chapter, and they were trying to give millions of dollars increase to the Durham Police Department. So myself and Dee Dee, others, who were part of building the chapter, we chained ourselves to the police station to oppose that $1 million increase to build this new police headquarters. And so throughout undergrad, the question of police was there, and protest was a main form. And it was organized around attention to protest, the question of why police are wrong, the history of racism, but really concretely challenging the institution. I didn't necessarily do, like, for example, school to prison pipeline, get this SRO, school resource officer, out of school. But now that I've graduated from undergrad, still participating in movement. After the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, on a local level, just like everywhere else across the country, masses of people took to the streets. And so the question was, since 2014, we have been in the street every year for something, the same method of protest. And so some young people now who are from Raleigh did work together around the school to prison pipeline, said, well, there's a national movement, a national trend of really coming for the budget. So you engage in the protest element, but really getting down to the question of power. How do you hit the institution at a really, really strong place? And how do you follow what people have been arguing for so long, that what keeps us safe is jobs, housing, education, and so many, other things, and not investing money in police? And how do we make this a reality for us? And so we engaged in a budget fight, and didn't get too many wins. And that was around 2021. But now going into the budget for fiscal year 2025, we were fighting. We introduced and got the city to think about a community response team. We work with them to do community input. We mobilize to council meetings. We're building organizations in majority African American neighborhoods here in Raleigh to really fight, not just to get this program established, but for us to also play an active role in our safety. I think one of the limiting things that I had, the system, capitalism, all these different elements are the reason for it. And you attack that institution, but also us as a people, we have a responsibility that we have to play in our safety. So we don't just one-sided, hit the institution like it needs to be hit, but we work in our community to shift the consciousness and bring forward these methods so that we're playing an active role in our safety, not just relying on an outside entity. So the work that I was able to do as a high school student, engaging in history, looking at the past, the history of student movements, the history of young people, it has now allowed me and other friends and comrades to really implement the lessons we heard from SNCC gatherings and apply it to our local situation, to experiment, to really engage in the difficult tasks of organizing, like brain surgery. We're able to do that. We've engaged in support work for city workers to, have respect on the job, to have a living wage, to be able to live in a city that they keep functioning. So we've been supporting UE Local 150, the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, pretty heavy around their budget fight and connecting, divesting from police and investing in economic justice. And last thing I'll say is that on the campus, as a professor of African American history, I have an obligation to the movement for social transformation on campus and in the community. And I'm
I want
lucky
to
that
ask
I'm back home where I was from. But
that point.
I'm working.
Hold that point just a second, because I'm going to get into education with both of you.
Okay. Sounds good. My bad. I was on a roll.
Sorry. Keep that roll going in your mind. Because I just want to, so keep that was a good, I love it. Tiffany, I know you're working with Delta flight personnel, training grassroots organizers, but how did what you learned earlier in the movement inform what you're doing now?
Miss Judy, I don't know why you need me here. I whipped out my pen so I could start taking notes about what y'all was saying. And I just want you to know, because I will compete against, I will fight you. I was bingo. If you wanted to talk about the books that you were working on, Miss Judy, I just want you to know that I won already. Tic-tac-toe down the middle. I was clicking the books as soon as you were saying them. Like, oh, I got that. Oh, I didn't get to get that. I gotta get that. Yeah, I had to go to the bookshelf and go get the look. See, look at him looking, trying to get a book. See,
I was trying to. I'm looking for my hands copy.
The camera cut directly to him. He was like, "Wait a minute, I think I got mine too." No, I'm. Thank y'all for this question because it's so grounding, and there's so much happening right now in the world, even as we speak. There's so much happening, and so taking a second to ground ourselves and how we got here and what we have learned from the past and how it's helped us get to do the work that we are doing now is just such an important exercise. So thank you for the question, Ms. Judy. You know, I had a second to think about it because you two were answering and I was taking notes. That it made me think about really just two principles or two big ideas. One, a lot of folks don't know this about me. I did theater for 8 years. One of the programs that I started in high school was theater arts, and I did a lot. I was a thespian member for 4 years out of high school and into college. I did run track and field, but when I got to college, the track and field team sucked. Sorry, Santa Cruz. And I joined the theater arts program there under the incredible Don Williams and did that for the 4 years that I was in college while I was also in student government. The reason why I'm putting so much of an emphasis on that is because, you know, I often don't talk about the arts as much. I talk about like strategy and campaign. And I have been chasing our dear sister, Ajamu, across the world as she is on tour for her incredible poetry. I have to send so much love to her right now. I was talking to her yesterday. And I was listening to her album, which everybody should go check out. And she has a particular song in there called Sonia, or a song poem called Sonia, that I've been listening to just on repeat all day today. And it just reminded me about how important arts and poetry are to the visions that we create as activists and organizers. And so, you know, being able to stand on a stage and do theater in front of a bunch of strangers and tell stories has not only helped me with the ability to like tell stories that I do now, and also create realities that don't currently exist or that we want to see exist. And I have traveled across the country, being able to talk to young people about the world that we actually can live in, right? Like we actually can live in a world where education is free. We actually can live in a world for all the agenda items that Ajamu just got finished listing off and talking about and the things that we fight for. We can live in a world without police. We can live in a world without mass incarceration. We can live in a world with universal voter registration. We can live in a world where women have the right to choose what they're going to do with their own bodies. The list goes on and on. We can live in a world that survives climate change. Like we can do all of those things. And theater has just taught me like the gift and the necessity of being able to create worlds in which we want to live in, because we don't recruit people to this work because of the violence and trauma. We recruit them to the work because we understand that the violence and trauma is not necessary, and we can create realities that are outside of that save us and that keep us safe and that are rooted in love, right? So I don't always give it that much credit, but theater has helped me tremendously in my experience growing up and being an activist and organizer. And you asked about, Ms. Judy, some of the work that I've done as a student activist, which is where I started, and how that's prepared me for the work I am doing now. I'm the former director of the Youth and College Division at the NAACP. I'm the former president of the National Student Association. I've been a labor union organizer for the last 12, 13 years, worked at the AFL-CIO, NEA, AFT, and now CWA as the senior campaign lead for the Delta airline flight attendants who want to form a union. It's the largest worker group across the country. 28,000 flight attendants across the world want a union and want a contract. And so my job is to support them in getting that done. And now that I think about it, there are so many connections, but the one that I want to favor is, you said it earlier, Ajamu, people who are centered, who are directly impacted, need to be the folks leading the work. And so as a student organizer, I learned very early, and I don't think I ever not believed this. Like when I wanted to run for student government at UC Santa Cruz, I didn't just say, I want to run for student government at Santa Cruz. I'm Tiffany and Loftin. Everybody vote for me. That's not what happened. What happened was there was actually a council. We called it the Ethnic Student Organization Council. It was a council of student leaders from the big organizations on campus. So the Black Student Union, the Queer Student Union, MECHA, whatever. All of them were on this the Women's Center. They were all on this table. and they took applications for people who wanted to run for office, not applications to elect them, but just applications to have them run in a slate that was backed by all the other student organizers, right? So I had to prove to these upperclassmen that as a freshman, I was going to be a good vice president, right? And so I got selected to be on this slate with this other group of people and built this family there. I learned very early that it was not about me, right? That if we're going to get free and we're going to win victories, we're going to do this together. I am not a flight attendant. I ain't never been a flight attendant. I fly Delta all the time. And I have learned so much just about aviation and what it means to organize workers, which is a campaign that I have never worked on before. I've learned the stressing flexibility of organizing people who are always in the air with their phone on airplane mode, who when they get on the ground, they want to be asleep and they want to be with their families, right? They don't kick it at the airport and hang out all day and mingle with their coworkers, right? There are 28,000 of them. And many of them, people don't realize this, many of them don't live in the bases that they are employed by. So I'm working with flight attendants that are based out of LAX, but that live in Texas, Washington, D.C., Salt Lake City, Florida, Oklahoma, Kansas, and they commute to LA to go to work. And then they go to work and then they come back to LA and then they commute to go back home. And so I have to catch these people in the sky while I'm talking to them, trying to organize a union. And I have learned the patience. Judy, what you said earlier about the relationship building, I've learned how to respectfully agitate somebody, right? And get them to answer open-ended questions. I have learned how to help somebody see the vision of what their union and what their contract can look like based off of information that they have given me as a collective. We've been able to uplift people higher than themselves so that, you know, it's not me running the campaign. This is a campaign led by flight attendants. The flight attendants might not know how to be organizers, and that's where I come in. But they are the leaders of this entire project. And so, or this campaign rather. So my job is to pour seeds into them the same way that the upperclassmen pour seeds into me to say, you can run for student government. You can be the national president of the Student Association. Come on over here to the AFL-CIO. My name is Carmen Berkeley, and I'm going to hire Tiffany and Loftin to be our program manager for all of the racial justice stuff across the labor movement. Like, I learned how to plant seeds in other people in the flight attendants because when I was a student organizer, they planted seeds in me. So those are my two big takeaways from like what I learned in the work I'm doing now.
Perfect. Okay, now going back to education, Ajamu. Okay, why don't we continue on, and then and I have a couple of things to say about. Well, no, let me start. I'll start, and then I'll go to you, Ajamu, and then Tiffany again. Because SNCC was always involved in education. I mean, even before Charlie Cobb, SNCC organizer, comes up with this idea of freedom schools in 1964 for Mississippi Freedom Summer. We're always talking about education. I mean, when I'm working with SNCC after he comes up with that, we do a primer to use in the freedom schools. I work on come up with an idea based on Charlie's idea of a residential freedom school in Chicago and Cordele, Southwest Georgia. But it's always around education, both internally within the staff, but also how do you change the education of people who are denied it, I mean, and poor white people are not getting fair education. I mean, none of them are, so personally, I've been on this dual track, and I got prepared for this in SNCC, working with this Negro history primer, working with the freedom schools tangentially, because I was not actually in a freedom school. But it prepares me for how do you teach this material. So after we finish the 14 hours of Eyes on the Prize, I become its education director. Now, I am scared to talk to any group of more than two people. Even when I was at the United Church of Christ, I would be afraid of doing a staff report to people I had seen every single day, right? But what happened is that, of course, the more you do it, the more you figure out how it's okay. So I become education director, right? And so I'm going, I'm working with teachers. So that's back in 1990. And now, director of 2 NEH teacher institutes with Duke University, who is one of our collaborators. We're doing an NEH thing. I mean, there's all this education, but I don't see any difference between the film work I do and the education, So yeah, Eyes on the Prize, it's part, for me, it was just continuation of the movement. It's how do you get people to see themselves in this social change stuff, right? And then I still find when you go into classes that young folks still assume, that it was only Dr. King and Rosa Parks, and they don't know it was folks just like them, their cousins and their mothers and their clergy and their, that they were the ones who made and sustained the movement. Sometimes after folks like SNCC and CORE and SCLC leave, those folks are still there in those communities, still doing movement. And so when you see what's happening with the DeSantis, but it's all over, it's all over the country. There's a suburban group called Red Wine and Blue, suburban moms, Midwest, moving out, but they are going against this banning of books, banning against teaching the truth, right? Because even suburban folks are realizing, wait a minute, if my kids, mainly white kids, don't get this information, that's a problem too. It's not just the black and brown kids shouldn't get it. DeSantis isn't worried about us. He's worried about these young white kids learning the truth, because they also are the ones who will be, exercising pressure. So the thing is, I'm interested. I know, Ajamu, you're assistant professor at North Carolina Central, and of course, Tiffany, you're doing education work as well. So I'm interested in how you see the movement being a part of this education work that you're doing. So first, over to you, Ajamu, since I cut you off.
Oh no, it's I think it's foundational. And honestly, I don't lead with that I teach African American history and public history, and I actually prefer that to be secondary. In that that I'm a movement person and I'm an activist, be primary, because what got me into history in the first place, what got me into education, taking it serious, really embedding myself in it, was the movement. How could I learn more to be of service to the larger society? So learning about Freedom Summer of 1964. And then when I got to North Carolina Central University, I'm interested in change. I'm taking classes on the Haitian Revolution, the history of Pan-Africanism, Black feminist thought, Black women in activism, the African presence in Europe. And so I'm engaging in not just learning these things because it's cool, but how is it applying to my effort to try and transform society, as a student. And so I've always seen education, especially history, as something that can inspire, something that can guide. When we were on the campus of NCCU, fighting around building name changes at a historically Black college, it was history, it was research, it was what students had done in the past that helped guide how we get the name of a white, supremacist off a campus building at NCCU successfully, and then name it in honor of our founder, Dr. James E. Shepard. It was history. We were fighting, for voting rights, against voter ID in North Carolina. That the history of students fighting, that education, knowing that is what encouraged me to fight. And so as I'm at NC State, I'm in public history. So in other words, history in service of the public. So my responsibility is, how do I, of course, teach the next generation of students? How do I write? How do I think about the past? How do I produce, some scholarship for the movement? But how do I use myself as a professor to aid the local movement in Raleigh? How can I help inspire action with history based on how we fought in the past for people in the present who are struggling for economic, political, social, environmental, and gender justice? How can I use that? How can I encourage students to build organization? There's at NC State, there was a campus, and you mentioned the Commission for Racial Justice. With PCBs, North Carolina birthed the environmental justice movement. Well, it came out that the education building at NC State, students were being, and faculty and workers were being exposed to high levels of PCBs, and over 100 cases of cancer were reported. And the university knew that PCBs existed in the building since 2018 and didn't act on it until 2023, the end of 2023. And so you have this element, and I'm teaching an American environmental history class. I can't teach, about environmental history, and we're not talking about it in the present. And so students in the class formed an organization, the Campus Community Alliance for Environmental Justice. So they're doing work, education work on campus, educating students about what PCBs are, what they cause. They're building, building a fight back to hold the administration accountable. I have students who went to D.C. On November 4th to stand in support of the Palestinian people. I had students who were fighting on campus, leading marches in solidarity with Palestine. So if it wasn't for the student movement, if it wasn't for movement in general, my position as a professor wouldn't be possible. So I have no choice but to always think first, not about my own career, about myself, but how can I use this position as a professor to support the motion of students on campus and young people in the community in general. So education is crucial. It inspires. History inspires, and constantly urging people to think about how they can create change is something that we have to continue to agitate around. And in my class, Tiffany, I know West Coast, Eric Mann and Judy, I know you know he has the book, The Playbook for Progressives. Well, my
Mhm.
students, they talk about change on campus. Well, we're reading Eric Mann. This is the book for the discussion this week. We're gonna break it down. How does change happen? How does it take place? What are some examples rooted in history? And so education is important so that not we don't just know things, but we know how to do things to improve humanity. I tell my students all the time, the reason you're here is not to get a degree for yourself. We've individualized the college education. You're here to learn and develop a certain set of skills so that you can go back to your community, and once you leave this institution, you can contribute to the fight to improve humanity. Your degree is not about you; it's about how can you aid society. So, um,
Mhm.
yeah, education is cool. Eric Mann, there, there it is, there it is. That's my best friend. They say get 10 copies and pass it to somebody else. So I passed my 10.
Well, since Tiffany has now moved in again too, let's go over to you. Thank you, Ajamu. That was perfect.
My goal in life is to be like Greg Carr and have all the books in the world.
Yeah.
Shout out to Professor Greg Carr at Howard University. So this is a great question too, and Ajamu, I just always learn so much from you. I've taught classes at the University of California, Santa Cruz for the last 3 years. I teach a class that is student sponsored, so it's accredited and it's for students. And it's called Mindful Collaboration. It's about the art of organizing on campuses. Now, we can all, spend a whole nother 30 minutes talking about what that means in the height of a national and global pandemic. But we won't talk about that now. What I will say is, as a visiting professor at UC Santa Cruz, education is actually in and of itself a form of organizing, right? Being able to awaken people and teach people and help people see connections is a form of organizing. So teachers are organizing these young folks automatically, whether they believe it or not. And as we are on these campuses and these institutions, whether we're doing a graduation speech, a workshop, a panel discussion, a visiting in class, education is a form of organizing. And I have been blessed to be invited to so many universities and college campuses across the country to either keynote an event or sit on a panel or host a workshop or do a summit or do whatever. And I don't take it lightly, the responsibility that I have to support these students and not only understanding Sankofa where they came from, but to also have some tools in their pocket so they can know what to do in case something like this happens at their institution. And it might not be the exact same thing, but it's going to be pretty close, right? And so I have been working with, and as we think about students in education right now, I'm holding a lot of space for the hundreds of thousands of students across the country who are holding encampments and protesting and resisting for a free Palestine. And as somebody who's been there 3 times, I hold this conflict so near and dear to my heart with so many of my loved ones. And these students are showing an active resistance and taking risks. And it is because they have, I think, the space and the capacity to build that type of community. We saw the Black Lives Matter movement, Miss Judy, and it was like all over the place, and college institutions and our workplaces, and even in our homes and the barbershop and the church and the da-da-da-da. But the campus institution, whether it's a university, 2-year, 4-year, whatever, is so special. It's so sacred when students get together and organize themselves and each other for a cause that is bigger than themselves, because they have the capacity, right? They live on campus most of the time. They also self-organize themselves into issues or identities and communities that they closely resonate with. So when I got to high school and college, I was in the Black Student Union because I'm a Black woman, right? I was like, I'm going to be in the Black Student Union. And I wanted to be with other Black people, especially at UC Santa Cruz, which is a predominantly white institution, right? I was a part of track and field because I loved athletes. I loved to work out. I also did love athletes. I just slipped. I did love the athletes too because they was fine as hell. But I also wanted to be in the track and field so I could be with them, right? We all cared about health and wellness. And so I was with the folks who wanted to work in teams and support and cheer each other on and become stronger, better versions of themselves. And so I think about a theater. I organize myself in the theater organization, right? So students right now across the country and young people across the country are finding ways to self-organize themselves based off of the issues they care about. When I worked at the NAACP, it was gun violence. It was student loan debt cancellation. It was voting rights. It was still the federal DREAM Act and better immigration reform. And it was sanctuary cities. And it was all the things that we could, it was debt-free college. It was all of the things that students wanted to mobilize themselves around. And that's why education is so important, because without that capacity, the actual physical space where they can be, I don't know how young people build movements that are sustainable. Now, one of the things that I think is really important is in that capacity and in that community, we know how to build strong organizations. One of the things that I've learned from my student activist life, Ms. Judy and Ajamu, is how to lose, how to lose a campaign, how to lose an election. I've never lost an election, but I've seen, we have lost a few elections in our timeline. And so I know how to lose because of those experiences. But in those losses, I know how to build strong organizations and build strong community. Panel, even though we've only met 2 or 3 times, we know we are in the same community with each other because we have gathered in those spaces. So I think education is mad important.
Fantastic. And you have given me a perfect segue into a discussion of the vote. And, it's really contentious. And, it's like, what are we voting for? Why do we have to vote? Well, it hasn't made any difference. And I just want to give a little intro at the beginning, and then I want to shove it to the two of you. When you both know this, but when we first started out in SNCC, right, we're mainly focused on demonstrating against legal segregation, right? Lunch counters, swimming pools, libraries, right? Then we moved to voter registration, and that shift happens because of Amiri Moore in Cleveland, Mississippi, who says to SNCC staff person Bob Moses, before there's ever a SNCC project in Mississippi, and while we're still doing demonstrations, right, Bob is going down because he has asked Ms. Baker that he has told her, well, we need to get more young people from Mississippi colleges for the second meeting of the SNCC, what becomes SNCC. So this is April 1960, right? And so they're going to do another meeting in October 1960. And Bob says to Ms. Baker, we don't have many people coming from the campuses in Mississippi. She says, you need to check with Amiri Moore, because Amiri is part of Ms. Baker's network, because that's what Ms. Baker does. She gives us an organizing philosophy, but she also gives us her network of grassroots leaders that she's been building since she was director of branches for the NAACP, right? So Bob goes to Amiri, and Amiri says, look, and Bob is staying with Amiri and his family. And Amiri says, Amiri's in Cleveland, Mississippi in the Delta. And he says, look, you young people can work on sit-ins if you want to. But he says, and I get this directly from Bob when we were doing an advisor meeting for Eyes on the Prize, right? And Bob is telling me, I said, I'm forgetting things. And Bob says, yeah, so am I. And then he proceeds to tell me for the next 45 minutes about things like what I'm about to tell you. Okay, so he says he goes to Amiri, and Amiri says, you young folks, you can do sit-ins, right? But he says, I know that our power as Black people will come through the vote. And then Bob says to me, as he's told the story often to others, Amiri takes out a precinct map, puts it on the kitchen table in Cleveland, Mississippi in 1960. And he then says to Bob, he shows where all the Black folks are mainly congregated. And then he says, but I, Amiri Moore, are not ready for you here with my organization here in Cleveland, Mississippi. But CC Bryant is ready for you down in Macomb, Mississippi. And the reason he knew that was because they were together in this group called the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, which was formed by returning World War II veterans. That's on snicdigital.org, by the way. We have a wonderful piece on that. But in any event, it's an organization. They had 15,000 Black folks in Mount Bayou, Mississippi, the all-Black town in Mississippi, right, in 1952, 53. But it's AMSI saying to Bob, I'm not ready for you here. But C.C. Bryant, Bob doesn't know about the Regional Council of Negro Leadership. I didn't know about it then either. But AMSI is saying to Bob, you need to go down to Macomb. C.C. Bryant will take care of you. And that's where the first voter registration drive happens. And it's where SNCC becomes an organization of organizers, right? And then we begin to understand that it's not about short-term demonstrations. We move to long-term grassroots organizing, and we focus on the vote as one of those tools that we can use for that. And as the inimitable Cortland Cox, whom we all know, says, it's one of those things that is necessary but not sufficient, right? So the vote is necessary but not sufficient, but it is necessary. But in these times, I need to ask you first, Tiffany, what is the role of the vote, and how do you get folks to...
Oh.
Over to you, Tiffany.
I thought your question was good. Go ahead, Miss Judy. I thought your question was going to be worse than that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the rest of the question. Ask me again.
Okay, it was going to be, but I'll tell you, if you want to take it in a different direction, you get to do that. So, what is the role of the vote today, and why is it important?
Not want to take it in a different direction. I'm going to stay right where you at, Miss Judy. The role of the vote. Again, when we talked earlier about people power, I understood when I signed that postcard for the Federal Dream Act that it was me signing the postcard that was a part of the advocacy in the timeline of moving legislation. But at the end of the day, the people who were going to vote on the legislation were people that we had voted in office, right? So I made that connection very clearly when I found out that 3 of them didn't vote the way I wanted them to. And I was like, well, how do I help them lose their job, right? And the way that I help them lose their job is by us voting them out of office and picking other people. So I myself have ran 8 elections and won all 8 of my elections by asking other people to vote for me. Yeah, fun fact about me. So I understand the necessity, as my mentor and our dear friend Cortland Cox says, that it's necessary but not sufficient. I think right now in the year 2024, nobody that I am in circles with is questioning the vote. We know how important it is to make decisions around judges, how important it is for us to influence policy, how important it is for us to influence city council members, how important it is for us to influence people who are running for sheriff in our communities. And over the last 6-7 years, I think especially young Black folks, especially millennials who have just experienced a wave of Black Lives Matter, we're understanding and seeing that some of the solutions that we are calling for come when we participate in the ballot box. So I think that the question of what's the role of it is absolutely necessary, right? Everybody must be registered. Everybody must participate. And most of our country doesn't participate, right? So I think that there's more work for organizers and activists for all of us to do. In terms of where we are politically right now, though, Miss Judy, and I'm saying, we always in SNCC, when we always bring ourselves together, we always do the intergenerational conversation. So I'd love for you to tell me, your thoughts around this. I am working with young people and students on college campuses who are clear that they will be voting down the ticket. But at the top of that piece of paper, we find ourselves in a very interesting dilemma. Mm-hmm. There are people who are protesting, and I don't mean people like small little think tank groups. I mean hundreds of people who are protesting both of our popular candidates at both parties. And I think what is incredibly beautiful about this moment, because I try to, remember what we're fighting for, is I think in this timeline, we're going to see the dismantling of a 2-party system and its popularity. People are finding that they already knew they didn't fit in either box. And now they're saying we need more boxes and we need more options. And and the people need to be in charge. And I think that's such a revolutionary, beautiful, powerful spirit to have upon us in 2024. But when it comes to the top of the ticket, I think that especially right now, young people are conflicted. I mean, you know, these last few weeks have been rough. All of us are on social media, and we've been watching and seeing the contradictions and the blatant hate and violence and lack of funding and priorities. We just got finished talking about education, and there are so many people who are saying, why can you give $194 billion to a foreign country, but you can't cancel 1.7 in student loan debt? Like, what is really going on right now? And the young folks are not saying that we're not going to punish democracy because of it. What we are going to do, though, is recognize that democracy is not really working, and we need to remove you from the process, and we're going to use democracy to do it. So, you know, I think in a couple years before now, Miss Judy, I think people would have been saying, you know, we're not voting. It's not a part of the process. We don't win anything. We won't do anything. In my experience and in my network, that's not what folks are saying right now. Folks are saying that we're going to vote. And we have to continue to do what we've been doing, but just in a bigger capacity. We need to run for office. We need to use this time of elections to not just give away our vote, but hold it as a negotiation tactic, right? Like, what are we using right now as the vote to get you to convince us to vote for you, and not the other way around? We're not blaming voters, but the candidates need to win our vote. How do we do that? And those conversations are happening right now. And I just moved to Atlanta, Georgia, 2 weeks ago. California does not feel like this, Miss Judy. Georgia is different. So I'm gonna learn a lot in this election cycle. I'll tell you at the end of the year what I learned, but this is very different from the West Coast. The West Coast didn't have these problems.
No. Okay, before I say anything, Ajamu, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I don't have much to add. Tiffany laid it out 100% of where people are, and I think, you know, we're in a wave of an envisioning a new type of politics, a new type of governing system. Lots more young people raising the question of running for office, and I think if we learn anything from the Black Power discussions that were had in Durham with SNCC veterans and activists of today, that, you know, we have to ensure that, you know, that quest for political office is connected to a movement, you know, and is embedded in the movement. It's not an individual running for an individual seat, but an individual representing the movement and accountable to that movement in that seat. And I think we're in on a local level in a beautiful phase. I think I know, especially for me, I'll admit this, I'm Gen Z, but I'm right at the top. You know, I was born in 90, so I'm like right there.
I did not know that.
I'm at, but millennials, you know,
I thought you were a millennial.
Millennials raised me. You know, I'm socialized, you know, millennials. So I try and take the millennial spirit to Gen Z. And I only tell my students at the end of the semester, because if I tell them I'm Gen Z, it's a wrap. It's over. I lose the class. But one thing that I'm noticing is that, you know, from my work in high school, and this is one lesson that, you know, in terms of assessing the work, is that, you know, we go to school board meetings, we're asking, you know, these questions, you know, we're saying, demanding this, demanding that, but the demands are going nowhere. And so we reached a point locally too, that we keep asking these people for these things. We keep showing them why it's necessary. Well, why don't we take over? Why don't we build some type of power on a local level? Why don't we run a strategic campaign here in Raleigh, or, you know, other places across the South, across the country? And so I think a new wave of politics is coming from young people, and not from an individual standpoint, but from a movement standpoint. And we're trying to, you know, steer this ship in the right direction.
I love that we're doing all the down ballot stuff, and I myself am tired of screaming at the screen every time Biden comes on. You know, and I voted uncommitted, but when it comes to between
you
these,
did. Go ahead, Miss Judy.
You betcha. Okay. But that's, oh yeah, oh no, you don't know how many letters. You know, one of my best friends is in Jews Against the Occupation. Well, now Jewish Voice for Peace. Okay, so I mean, all of that. The main problem I have is that I know that Trump is a fascist, And I know that we will have no power to organize if he gets in. And so, we've always been between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I remember when we had Goldwater, we had Nixon, we had all these people, horrible Reagan, horrible people, right? This man will take us all down, right? And we will have no room to do anything. When you look at the plan that they're already planning, from the Federal Society all the way up, I don't have to tell you this. So my worry is what happens when we get to the top of the ticket if Trump gets in, because we have nowhere to go. I'm not going to Canada. He really will do all the things he's already telling us he will do that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to continue to protest in the way that I have always protested and will, aside from screaming, epithets at the TV every time he or his administration come on, but how you organize in the way that you're talking about, which is down ballot, judges. Oh my God, we got to get more judges in there. And I'm not talking just Supreme Court, right? All of those down ballot people. But when you get to the top election for president, I can't do 4 years under Trump because he will take us all down. So I'm trying.
Miss Judy, can I add to that? You're absolutely right, and I don't want to leave our listeners. Wondering like what the choice is in that scenario, because you're absolutely right, and I don't think that me or Ajamu were saying at all. And I know you're not accusing us of saying this, but I want to make it clear to the listeners: we're not confused about the choices that we have. We're not confused, right? But it's almost the beginning of summertime. Summertime just started. We have about 5 or 6 months away from the election. And so as an organizer, my only hope in waking up in the morning and continuing to do this work, when I know we only have those 2 choices as of right now, is for me to use the next few months while somebody is running their campaign to try to convince voters why we need to vote for them, right? To use that opportunity to push said candidate, to not scare us about the candidate we can't have, but to tell us really what we gonna get the next 4 if we put you back in office, right? Like, tell us what you're gonna do for us. You're the president right now, so tell us what you're gonna do for us right now. And what's pissing people off, excuse my language, is that people are saying, we don't want you to continue to fund Israel. This is not a war. This is a genocide and an apartheid. We do not want you to send weapons. We don't want you to continue defending them and supporting them unconditionally. We want you to halt all of your relationships with Israel, so much so that people have put their physical bodies on the line to stop ships from going over to Israel, stop planes from going over to Israel. People have set themselves on fire and killed themselves just so we can get out of the situation. And we are in an election cycle, right? And so if Joe Biden, our president, is ignoring the loud and widely felt base of voters, then this is our opportunity as activists and organizers to say, we're going to push him now. Our job is to push him now continuously, even while he is running for president. And if we don't give a damn, right, about Donald Trump, we don't care. What we care about is, are you going to do your job right now? And let's push you as much as possible. Now, in 5 or 6 months, I'm going to have a different conversation. I'm going to say, look, this is the 2 we got. And I'm going to do that too. But right now, I'm like, Joe Biden don't deserve shit. I'm not giving him nothing, because he has proved to me that he will support a genocide and apartheid that's happening across the country and go against the entire world to support Israel unconditionally when we have told him multiple times not to. Let's give ourselves a little bit of the wiggle room to organize in the time that we have left, because elections are not tomorrow. They're at the end of the year. You know what I mean?
Oh, honey, I'm with you, my sister. No, that's a perfect position to take. Yes. Okay, I have gone over time, so I'm going to, parting words. That was perfectly put. Thank you.
What is time?
Okay, that is so great. And this is the last question. What one thing was most important to you in terms of learning from the way SNCC organized that helps inform your work now? And first to you, Tiffany.
Ooh, it's a beautiful question, Miss Judy. Let me just say how much I have to continue to say publicly how much of an honor it is to be a student of SNCC now, and to be invited to so many spaces to learn from you all so often. One of the things that y'all have drilled into my head that I never used to think about and never made time for was what Danita calls the memory work of what it is that we do. And I think about whatever that saying is, that is, I'm about to mess it up. The saying that says something like, you know, whoever tells the story of the lion is the person who something. You got to tell the version of the story of the person who is the prey of the lion.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the lion will always be right. It's something like that.
Yes.
And I think about all of the work that we've been doing over the last few years, and how we need to make more intentional efforts to document our work, not just with pictures and videos, but to write about it and tell people what we were doing and what we were thinking in this moment. If we don't, then our stories won't be told. People won't think we weren't doing anything, and they'll only see what the news articles talked about and what the news did. And that does not we all know that does not accurately reflect our efforts towards liberation, and also where our values and our agendas are. And I have learned from you all to do that while we're doing the work, and not to try to wait until after the campaign is over, because the campaign's never over. After that campaign finishes, I take a nap, and then there's a new campaign we have to work on. We don't have time to write all the stuff. But in this process from SNCC, because of the digital gateway, because of this podcast, because of the panels and discussions that you all do live in person around the country, I've just been learning that I have to remember to write things down while we're doing it, so that somebody in the future can learn from the experiences that we're having now. I cherish that skill that I've learned from you guys, and I continue to practice it every time I get around you all.
Fantastic. Okay, how about you, Ajamu?
Yeah, SNCC Digital Gateway, SNCC veterans, and the people I met throughout the process changed my life from the perspective as a historian, but also as an activist. I started working on a project when I was a sophomore at NCCU, and I still draw on the lessons, the conversations, the gateway. And so many other things from that period, and even into the present, when we're thinking about creating change today. You all have put forward that we have a beautiful tradition, a tradition that requires discipline, requires sacrifice, a tradition that works, a tradition that can move humanity forward. And so I take that with me in every class that I have. The SNCC Digital Gateway goes up. Whenever I'm talking about the role of history in the movement, the SNCC Digital Gateway goes up, and you all have inspired many of us in ways that you don't know. But as we enter this period of high level of crisis, we're going to need organization at its highest form, at its highest scale. We're going to need people who are committed in ways that haven't been committed before. And I think you all's history, SNCC's history, has shown that in moments of national uprising, in moments of societal transformation, moments of crisis, your life can be changed. You can ask questions about what you're going to do, and it's okay to step into the movement. It's okay to dedicate. You may have went to school. You may have thought you were going to do this, but the movement, the world had a different plan, and it's okay to step into that, be transformed by it, and be a part of improving humanity. So. SNCC, learning from SNCC, as Tiffany said, being a student of SNCC is one of the greatest things that I've experienced, and now to try and implement things that we learned and pass it on to younger activists and organizers.
Oh, this is so fantastic. Tiffany Loftin and Ajamu Amiri Dillahunt, it has been a delight to speak to you on all these. Yes, indeed. It is just, you just energize me. I love it. I love it. And you get from us, but I'll tell you, we get from you, honey. We just get the energy and the thought, the intellectual energy that you give off is wonderful. And it keeps us going. And, at this point, I've been going for 80 years. So this is a long time, and you just keep me going more. So I love it. Thank you so much. And I think so I'm going to end there.
For full biographies, additional resources, and B-roll clips, Visit our website at www.snclegacyproject.org.